Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Tuesday, April 14th, 2020, and today we're going to be taking a look at an in-depth analysis at the 2020 Senate election in Arizona. So, I guess as we all know, there's a special election in Arizona coinciding with the 2020 presidential election. Now, this election is very interesting because Doug Ducey, the incumbent governor, appointed Martha McSally, the Republican candidate for Senate in 2018 from Arizona, to be senator following John McCain passing away. And essentially, what we see here is just Martha McSally, again, the all but certain to be Republican nominee, versus Mark Kelly, who arguably does not have too much political experience, but definitely is known by the people in the state of Arizona and has a really strong chance at winning this election. So let's just go ahead and take a look. So in terms of what actually happened, unfortunately, after John McCain passed away, John Kyle, I guess the former senator from Arizona, he resigned in 2016, I believe, and it became an open seat, or 2018, and it became an open seat that Martha McSally ran for. So he was appointed to be in this seat just for a little while. He resigned December 31st, 2018. Starting at the, I guess, fresh new year, Martha McSally was proposed as the nominee. And of course, it's up to the governor, so incumbent Republican chooses someone with the Republican Party. But regardless, Martha McSally, I mean, she's a candidate who was rejected by voters one time. I mean, she doesn't exactly have the best credentials to actually win a Senate election in Arizona, which is exactly why a lot of people are looking at this Senate race in particular, because traditionally Arizona is a Republican state, and we all know that. I mean, Arizona went for Mitt Romney, went for John McCain, it went for Donald Trump, for George Bush. The last time it went for a Democrat was in 1996 with Bill Clinton, and he won it by less than 5%. In 2018, the Senate election actually went to the Democrats for the first time in a very long time, and it looks like actually it's going to be competitive on the presidential level as well. So the only real candidate running for the Republican primary in the Senate election in Arizona is Martha McSally. I mean, we have a skincare company executive and a former teacher. Realistically, they are not the candidates that are going to do well on this ballot. And we know Martha McSally is the incumbent, the factor of it in a primary. She's going to soar to victory. And look at all the people that declined to run. We have Doug Ducey, the governor who appointed Martha McSally. That'd be interesting. John Kyle resigned it, so there's no real reason as to why he would run. Former governor of Arizona. Joe Arpaio doesn't really have a chance at anything statewide at this point. And Kirk Adams, chief of staff to Doug Ducey, and it was the Speaker of the Arizona House of Representatives. I believe that, Martha McSally was in the United States Congress. But now let's go ahead and take a look at the Democratic candidates. So we have Mohammed Arif and Mark Kelly. And Mark Kelly is husband of Gabby Giffords. If you don't know who that is, I guess there's a whole story circulating with her and gun rights, but Mark Kelly is definitely a person on his own, a former astronaut, engineer, retired U.S. Navy captain. So again, a veteran just like Martha McSally. And Mark Kelly, he has a pretty strong chance at winning this race. There was a lot of speculation about him actually running in 2018. If you were one of my earlier viewers, I actually used Mark Kelly as one of my election night Democratic nominees for the Arizona Senate election before it was clear that Kyrsten Sinema was going to become the senator or the Democratic nominee at that point. So I think that's really interesting that Mark Kelly is actually running, not just discussed. There are a number of people who turned it down, but I think that was all to pave the way for Mark Kelly. And let's take a look at some of these predictions. I mean, toss-ups all around and a lean Democratic call from Sabato Crystal Ball. I mean, Sabato Crystal Ball doesn't necessarily get things wrong, and the ranking of a toss-up in our traditionally Republican state definitely does not spell out good news for either President Trump or Martha McSally. So let's take a look at the last time that a Democrat was elected to the United States Senate in Arizona. So actually 2 years ago in 2018, I covered this election live, and it was a huge thing that Arizona flipped because Florida had flipped to the GOP, North Dakota had flipped, Missouri had flipped to the GOP, and Arizona surprisingly ended up flipping towards the Democrats, which actually solidified a little bit more of the Democratic numbers. That way they didn't actually lose as much as they thought they were going to lose. In this Senate election, I mean, there was high turnout, 65% turnout in a midterm election year. I mean, there's a reason Democrats typically win when there's increased turnout, because the voting base that typically doesn't vote is minority voters. And this election was all around very interesting. Let's just take a step 2 years back. The 2016 presidential election. this is when Arizona became competitive. It wasn't in 2012. It certainly wasn't in 2014. 2016 was the first year that we considered Arizona to be a toss-up. A pure could go either way. Now, a lot of people, including myself, had this as a lean Republican state, but when a state that voted for Romney by nearing double digits, I think actually 12%, comes down to a 4% margin, barely 4%, actually not even, with Donald Trump ahead of Hillary Clinton, things are going to start to go off in your head. And especially when you have an extremely popular incumbent, John McCain, with a 13% margin. I mean, something was changing in Arizona, and something was changing fast. They already had 4 Democrats in the House. They had 5 Republicans. So 2018 already was going to end up spelling out bad news if there had been a sudden change in the demographic, which there has been. And if you take a look at the 2016 election, this is when it all began for Arizona Democrats. This is when it became competitive. It was a combination of Hillary Clinton being a centrist Democrat, and that's the type of Democrat that's loved in Arizona. Kyrsten Sinema is an example, perfect example, part of the Blue Dog Coalition, and Donald Trump being an unpopular incumbent. Arizona doesn't like Donald Trump Republicans. Sure, a primary victory when you have a number of other candidates in the race, but when you're talking about the general election, there's a reason this race narrowed. There's a reason Georgia narrowed. These are states that are traditionally Republican states for candidates such as John McCain and Mitt Romney, not for Donald Trump. And Hillary Clinton also offered a centrist point of view that definitely resonated with these voters. Now, you can't ignore that Gary Johnson was in this race, but when you head over to the 2018 Senate election, well, there really isn't anyone that could hurt Martha McSally in this race. We have a Green Party candidate, and we all know that Green Party candidates typically peel away from a liberal base, which most of the time votes for the Democrats. Kyrsten Sinema got pretty much an exact 50%, so not necessarily a majority, but still, if you add up, I guess even if you give her half of the Green Party votes. But Martha McSally, she got 47.6%. Realistically, she could have won another statewide race if she had ran. But you can't appoint her directly after losing a race with her name fresh in voters' minds saying, I already did not vote for this woman at the ballot box. What is the reason why that would change now with a presidential election? Donald Trump's approval rating hasn't changed much in Arizona. Martha McSally's approval rating has not been too good in Arizona. You're talking about someone who lost an election and was put in place. For example, if you supported Donald Trump in the 2016 election, let's say Donald Trump resigns from office. Mike Pence resigns. Nancy Pelosi's in. She nominates Hillary Clinton to be VP. They switch places. And, what exactly would you do in that scenario to a point where you didn't vote for this candidate? You didn't want this candidate the first time. Literally a year before she was appointed. It was fresh in everyone's heads. So at that point, when Arizona became more of a Democratic state, Martha McSally definitely should have just taken a step away from the Arizona scheme and definitely just recalibrated with the Republican Party there and figured out what actual statewide race that she could win besides the Senate race, because this is not going to be a good push for the Arizona GOP whatsoever. I'm telling you that right now. I'm almost certain that Mark Kelly will win this race. But let's take a look at the areas that I guess were different than the 2016 presidential election. If we take a look, this county right here, Maricopa County, this is one that definitely has been discussed by a lot of political pundits. Well, every other county remained the same except for that county, and it has Phoenix, Arizona. It definitely should have a large population center, 743 precincts. Over 1 million votes from there, and only about 2 million in the entire statewide race. So this is an area that Kyrsten Sinema won over, and it looks like it replicates the same statewide margin, give or take a couple percentage points. So realistically, well, this is a good indicator of who's going to win the race. And when you take a look at the 2018 results and you continue to move along with the Democratic increase in terms of voters and changing demographics, Arizona, number one, a border state, definitely has a number of immigrants coming in that typically vote for Democrats. So that's number one, a huge factor in this thing. It's not some, liberal conspiracy that demographics are changing. They're changing all across the Sun Belt. And Arizona is rapidly moving towards the Democratic side. Usually this change would take place over 8 to 12 years, over numerous presidential elections. That's not what's happening here. Arizona, one night, all of a sudden decided to vote for Democrats. Not just here. In the House elections, the Democrats have now sent more representatives from Arizona on the Democratic side than Republicans. Okay, now they have one Democratic senator and one Republican, and likely to be two Democratic senators based off where I stand with that Senate race. And let's take a look at fundraising. One of the most accurate indicators of who's going to win a race, except for maybe a couple of races in 2016, if you want to nitpick at that. But generally, I mean, it's like 90% if you have more money, then you win the race. And Mark Kelly consistently outperforms Martha McSally in terms of fundraising. And the thing is, I mean, Mark Kelly, he's going to probably win this race, and Martha McSally is continuing to raise money when this money definitely could be fundraised for other states that are definitely way more in need. North Carolina, for example, they have an incumbent that has a possibility of losing there. Arizona, I genuinely think, is a lost cause for the Republicans in 2020. Not just that, but polling data indicates it as well. I mean, it's practically insane, these margins, especially with an incumbent Republican. We're not talking about an open race where nobody knows who Martha McSally is. The voters know who she is, and they don't like her. Just taking a look back at 2018, I mean, we saw the same thing. Sure, last-minute polling showed all of a sudden that Martha McSally came ahead, but then Kyrsten Sinema ended up pulling away. And if you take a look, Kyrsten Sinema had a pretty strong lead throughout the entire thing. Everyone thought that it was over since the polls were narrowing up, and we got shocked because of 2016, because this is exactly what happened, but it ended up going to Kyrsten Sinema. And if we take a look, we're seeing the same type of trend with the early, I guess, polling data, and generally, I do think that this is how the race is going to end up. Unless Martha McSally somehow can make a deal or a play with Arizona voters, they're not going to want to vote for the candidate that they already decided should not be serving and representing them in the United States Senate. So I do think that this entire race is going to be very interesting. It's going to be a very close indicator of what's going to happen in the presidential election as well. So as the Senate election goes, if Mark Kelly's bringing out Democratic voters, obviously that doesn't spell out good news. And Arizona's 11 electoral votes. If Trump wins Wisconsin and every other state remains the same, I mean, he's still if the Democrats win Michigan and Pennsylvania and Trump wins Wisconsin and every other state stayed the same from 2016, Trump still wins. But if Arizona goes, those 11 electoral votes will negate Wisconsin's 10 electoral votes. The Democrats could just say, we don't really care. If we're winning in Arizona, we don't need to worry about Wisconsin. Obviously, they're not going to do that publicly. They're going to talk about fundraising in every single state, holding rallies in every single state. But realistically, Arizona is within striking distance to have possibly Republicans hold or Democrats hold the state legislatures in Arizona. It's down to 31 to 29 compared to 35 to 25 in 2016. When we look at the Senate elections, 2 Democratic senators possibility, a majority of Arizona representatives being Democrats. The only thing that the Republicans will have in Arizona, not a presidential election win, not a Senate win, not a House win, governorship with Doug Ducey. And who knows, if Trump's reelected in 2020, that seat is pretty much long gone for Arizona Republicans. But that pretty much wraps up this video. I'm going to be doing a more in-depth analysis about North Carolina's upcoming Senate election as well, probably tomorrow. Surprisingly, my computer ended up working when I turned it on about a little bit over an hour ago. So that's pretty cool, but hopefully it doesn't crash anytime soon. But again, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below, and I will see you all tomorrow.